Set in the land of Custodia, a world heavily inspired by Spanish Christianity, Blasphemous combines the 2D Metroidvania formula with elements from the Souls-Borne games developed by From Software to create a game quite unlike any other that was released in 2019. One of the influences it picks up from Software's famous series is the way it tells its story. The player is dropped into the world with little to no explanation, and it's up to them to piece together the stories of the land through side quests, item descriptions, and deductions made from the clues they get. This can make for a confusing experience of what happens and why as one plays through the game, but using the resources available to us, let's try and piece together the full journey of the Penitent one as he journeys across Custodia to complete his penance. Obviously, spoilers for the story of the game are going to follow, so consider this your warning. I'll try to list all of the sources of information used to piece everything together, but that's going to be quite a list, so it may not be complete. Also to note, there are quite a few side stories in the game that the Penitent one can complete, but I won't be covering those. This video will only cover the main story. Now with all of that out of the way, let's get started. Before we get into the actions of the game though, we have to explain the background of the world. Custodia, the land in which the game takes place, is a place of deep religious worship. The populace of the land revere a divine will referred to as the Miracle, who blesses/punishes the denizens as it sees fit. These blessings and punishments manifest themselves in very real ways. Examples include the Knot of 3 Words, also referred to as the first miracle, where a young boy that prayed for punishment and pain to satiate his guilt was transformed into a tree, out of which pours golden sap. The creation of Mea Culpa, where a woman, pounding her chest with a relief of the Twisted One, whom is the boy mentioned before, prayed for punishment, so a sword erupted from the effigy, killing her and transforming her into a statue referred to as the Kneeling Stone, and the never-ending punishment of Lady Socorro, who prayed for mercy on those who were sentenced to death and torture, so must now take on all of their pain instead. Numerous churches were built in Custodia to revere the divine miracle and its very tangible interactions in the life of custodians, the largest of which was called the Mother of Mothers. The clergy for the Mother of Mothers was led by a man named Escribar, who sat as the head figure for the faith of all of Custodia, and was the one who could commune directly with the miracle. However, one day, Escribar became disillusioned with the miracle, lamenting that it was not listening to their pleas. Frustrated by the idea that the miracle had forsaken them, and that his prayers and those of his congregation were falling on deaf ears, Escribar turned his throne from those before him and refused to face them. Thus began the age of the turned throne, a time period where His Holiness never acknowledged his congregation. After several years passed, the congregation began to notice something. The fingers of His Holiness started stretching out into probing limbs. His skin began to dry and harden. His blood became thick and sticky. The very thing he believed abandoned Custodia and its people finally demonstrated its power and prompted a dramatic change within Escribar. When his transformation was complete, he was a huge tree, withered and barren, that towered over the cathedral. From within his massive form, a heat emanated, and grew until the dry boughs of the monument were caught ablaze and burned unceasingly for 90 days, leaving a large mountain of ash upon which sat the turned throne. The remnants of the clergy and congregation tried scrambling up the mountain to reach the throne at the top, to take the place of His Holiness and be the one to commune directly with the miracle. But all of them, every single one, were swallowed up by the gray ash at their feet. The cathedral fell silent. A wind blew the burnt remains of His Holiness across the Mother of Mothers, and then cries began to emanate from the ash. As they grew in noise and number, the punished emerged from the mound, hordes of the miracle who were going to punish all of those that had escaped this divine will of the miraculous pain. Included among them was His Holiness Escribar, who rose with a crimson-skinned body and a new penance. To forgive the sins he committed prior to his transformation, he would have to endlessly suffer 3 holy wounds representing his motives: attrition, contrition, and compunction. To ensure nothing interfered with these sores, the miracle created 3 guardians from among its most fervent and uncorrupted saints to safeguard them, and to ensure Escribar couldn't escape, the gates to the Mother of Mothers were sealed, with the holy wounds being the keys that would unlock them. They would remain so until the day one chosen by the miracle would retrieve the holy wounds to unlock the gates, climb the mountain of ash, and take Escribar's place to be the one to commune with the miraculous pain. Which brings us to our protagonist, an anonymous brother of the Brotherhood of the Silent Sorrow, whose members donned spire-like helmets and took a vow of silence as their penance. One day, he was approached by a skeletal creature named Desemparados, who, being a scholar of the miracle, informed the man that the miracle had now set its eyes upon him. She led the man to the chapel that housed the kneeling stone, where the sword Mea Culpa was set in the statue, and told him the time had come for the sword to have a new bearer. As the man pulled the sword of guilt from the kneeling stone, starting on the path set before him by the miracle, Desemparados gave him a new name, the Penitent One. A short time later, he encountered his first trial. Chrysanta of the Rapt Agony, a knight in golden armor whose penance robbed her of sight, stood opposed to the Penitent One. Whereas the Penitent One's penance was to overthrow the Father and the Mother of Mothers, Chrysanta explains hers is the opposite, implying she must protect him. Their battle didn't last long, ending with the Penitent One's first kneeling. Chrysanta then dragged the Penitent One back to where he came from, the Brotherhood of the Silent Sorrow, and threw his body upon the numerous corpses that littered the grounds, telling him that if he was really chosen by the miracle, he would rise again, escaping death, and continue with his penance. And if that were the case, they would meet again. Sure enough, the hero chosen by the miracle rose from the bodies of his brothers and sisters and set out to continue his penance, thus beginning the events of the game. The Penitent One kills the Warden of the Silent Sorrow, seemingly a guardian standing watch over the corpses of the Brotherhood, in order to make his way out of this sanctuary. He comes upon a man named Deo Gracias, who, like Desemparados, is working as a part of the will of the grievous miracle. Deo Gracias tells him his goal is the Cradle of Affliction, a relic of the first miracle which rests next to the turned throne atop the mountainous pile of ash at the pinnacle of the Mother of Mothers Church. But before he can get into the Mother of Mothers, he would have to complete the 3 humiliations, humbling himself before the saints of the miracle, whereupon he would obtain the 3 holy wounds of His Holiness, unlocking the doors of the church. Then tells him where he will find these 3 trials. One atop a tall mountain, another in a deep church, and the last in the bowels of a bell planted upside down within the earth. Before giving him leave, Deo Gracias also gives the Penitent One a thorn to adorn Mea Culpa with, explaining that if, in his journeys, the small barb grows over his sword, pricking him as he grips Mea Culpa, then it would mean the Penitent One is at the mercy of the miracle, in whatever form that would take. With that, the Penitent One continues on, traversing the wastelands of Custodia until coming to the entrance of Mercy Dreams, the underground church that houses the first humiliation. After entering, a knight in red armor appears. Named Esdras, he is of the Anointed Legion, the body responsible for protecting the Mother of Mothers, and based on the conversations he has with his sister, means to stop the Penitent One from reaching the holiest of churches. Inside, the Penitent One dodges the dangers of the seemingly repurposed dungeon until reaching the bottom of the structure, where he finds a large statue cradling a brambly-limbed creature. The creature comes to life, and with anger bellowing up from within it, begins an assault on the small person in front of it. But the Penitent One slices through the briars of Ten Piedad's body to claim victory. In the next chamber, before the sight of a large, slumbering man, the Penitent One kneels and is transported to a wasteland littered with bodies, where he meets a large golden head floating before him. This is the first Guardian Visage, who was chosen by the miracle to guard the holy wound of attrition, which it now bestows upon the Penitent One, completing the first of his humiliations. He makes his way through a sewage system to come to the mountains of endless dusk, and while crossing through these, he's beset upon by a crimson harpy who wields a large sword and calls lightning from the sky. If he survives her attack, a small red ribbon is dropped by the woman as she disappears. Named Perpetua's Protection, it establishes a link between the flying woman and Esdras, the knight in red seen earlier, and gives more background on the man. The sister he talks aloud to died some time ago, yet Esdras couldn't bear the loss and was driven mad. He still talks to her as if she were there, and apparently, his words aren't falling on deaf ears. The Penitent One goes on, ringing the great buried bell of Hondo, which shatters the floor under him, dropping him into the grievous ascends beneath, where the groans of anguished voices emanate. This phenomenon comes from the Tres Angustias, 3 spectral beings that dwell at the lowest point of the pit, and the gatekeeper to the second humiliation. Upon their defeat, the Penitent One kneels before an empty altar that stands before a gaunt man, meets the second Guardian Visage, and gains the holy wound of contrition. The Penitent One then begins a long climb up, past where the olive trees wither, past the graveyard of the peaks, to the convent of Our Lady of the Charred Visage. And as he enters the sanctuary, Esdras appears again, hinting at an upcoming encounter with the Penitent One, and telling his sister he will not need her help, as the miracle will protect him. Inside the convent, after sliding past the hostile sisters and avoiding streams of lava, the Penitent One comes face to face with the lady herself. Upon her defeat, he kneels before the altar in the next chamber, meets with the Guardian Visage, and gains the third holy wound, the wound of compunction. With the 3 humiliations complete, the Penitent One crosses the bridge of 3 cavalries connecting the wasteland of churches to the Mother of Mothers. But before he gets across, he's confronted by Esdras, who, with his belief that the miracle will protect him, launches his attack on the Penitent One, determined to stop him from reaching the church. The battle begins to turn in the Penitent One's favor, however, when suddenly Perpetua appears, ready to help her brother in stopping this heretic from reaching the Mother of Mothers. But even with their combined strength, they cannot contest with the will of the miracle, and Esdras falls in battle with the Penitent One, freeing the way for him to enter the Mother of Mothers and begin the ascent to the deambulatory of His Holiness to reach his goal. However, he finds he cannot reach higher than the Archcathedral rooftops, as in order to climb higher, he needs to use an elevator that's no longer operable. However, he notices a bust of 3 men resting on the elevator. Upon the faces of these men, he places 3 masks he's found at various places in the church. The deformed mask of Orestes he finds in a strange dream after defeating Melchiades, the exhumed archbishop in the Mother of Mothers church. The embossed mask of Crescente he finds after defeating Exposito, the scion of abjuration, deep in the depths of the library of negated words and the sleeping canvases, where all the blasphemous writings and heretical pieces of art are doomed to lie unread and unseen. The mirrored mask of Dolphos he finds after traversing the wall of holy prohibitions, defeating Circe, returned by the flame, and riding an elevator to a previously unexplored portion of the convent of Our Lady of the Charred Visage. With these masks upon the faces of the men, the elevator comes to life, and pulls the Penitent One up to the rooftops. As he continues his climb, he's stopped by a familiar figure. Chrysanta of the Rapt Agony stands before him, ready to give the Penitent One his second kneeling. However, at the battle's end, it's not the Penitent One left kneeling, but Chrysanta, who makes an escape before the final blow is dealt. The Penitent One continues on, coming to the deambulatory of His Holiness, where he meets Escribar face to face. As the Sword of Guilt and the Sword of Gold clash together in battle, the frail frame of His Holiness leads to his downfall. But a wave of ash washes over the two, and Escribar reveals his true form. A gigantic metal cabinet decorated with intricate regalia, the face of which opens up to reveal the last son of the miracle. The battle begins anew with the powerful attacks of Escribar nearly bringing the Penitent One to his end. But the Penitent One is able to take advantage of the openings he gets and defeats Escribar, finally setting him free from his wounds, his guilt, and his prison. The Penitent One proceeds through the church, coming to the mountain of ash upon which sits the turned throne. At its base stands Deo Gracias, who pushes the Penitent One to climb the mound to have his final communion with the miracle. The Penitent One starts up, and his steps start getting slower and slower. His feet sink further into the ash with every step. Fight as he might, he struggles with ascending through the fine material, and before he reaches the top, he's swallowed up by the mountain, just like everyone who's tried to climb it before him. As Deo Gracias gives the Penitent One his eulogy, he draws forth his helmet and places it in a pile of others where the Penitent One is doomed to fade away as just another anonymous visage, unworthy of communion with the miracle. In order to be deemed worthy and reach the cradle of affliction, there is still a task the Penitent One needs to do to complete his penance. In the Graveyard of the Peaks, the Penitent One can find an immaculate bead, seemingly devoid of purpose. While wearing the bead in his rosary, the Penitent One will find that the heavy guilt that usually accompanies him after he succumbs to one of the hardships of his penance is gone, absorbed by the bead, which loses a bit of its purity with each absorption. If it takes in enough, the previously immaculate bead will become completely tainted with the weight of true guilt. The statues of confessors that dot the landscape of Custodia use these instruments to perform the same function for the denizens of the land, freeing them of the weight of their guilt, absorbing it within themselves. If the Penitent One destroys one of these statues while bearing the weight of true guilt, a portal will appear in the rubble of the statue. Through the portal is a dungeon in which monstrous manifestations of the sin and guilt that the statues have absorbed dwell. The Penitent One will slay these creatures, freeing the statues of the guilt they hold, whereupon he will find the little thorn given to him by Deo Gracias near the start of his journey will begin to grow, feeding upon the sin and guilt built up within these statues. Each dungeon he completes feeds the thorn more and more, and upon completing the final one, having fed the little barb all of the sin and guilt of Custodia, it will have grown into a twisted bramble, covered in the blood of its bearer as it grows over the hilt of the Sword of Guilt. Bearing the weight of true guilt with the Custodia of sin wounding him as he holds mea culpa, the Penitent One is now heavy with the weight of all of the guilt of the entire land upon his person. Yet when he ascends the mountain of ash, his footfalls remain light, never sinking into the burnt remains beneath him, and he reaches the turned throne at its pinnacle. Understanding now his penance, he takes his place on the throne and ends his life with mea culpa. The guilt fragment he leaves behind bears the guilt of not only himself, but of everyone in Custodia, thanks to the relics he's collected. But this time, the miracle doesn't revive him, instead forcing him to undergo a familiar arboreal transformation. With his sacrifice, the Penitent One has freed the land of Custodia of all of its guilt, holding it within his wooden form, freeing its people from the ungodly will of the miracle. The Penitent One is revered by the populace of Custodia for his sacrifice as the new father and the true last son of the miracle. So shall he be forever and ever. However, the will of the divine miracle is ever-changing, and before the game ends, there's one final act of blasphemy.
And thus shall your name be erased under the heavens.
And thus ends the story of Blasphemous. I hope I was able to explain everything in a way that made sense, and if I'm being honest, some of the language and themes of the game were pretty difficult for me to understand, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask and I'll do my best to answer them. If you want more Blasphemous lore videos, there's actually a whole series that SmoughTown has done over on his channel that breaks things down even more, so I recommend giving those a watch. The ending scene with Chrysanta has definitely implied that there is more to be told, so I'm sure we'll head to the land of Custodia in some way in the near future. But until then, I'm done here, so thank you for watching and see you later.